All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, I hope you are having a fantabulous day, night, morning, evening, wherever you all are at. It is time to watch another movie. It's the Movie Commentary Podcast, the podcast in which we watch movies and talk about them in any kind of way. And today, before we start, we have a good movie for you today. Really funny movie. Bit of a cult classic, as some would say. But before we get started here, I just want to thank you all again for tuning in. Taking your time to listen to this startup commentary podcast here. And again, we are now on Apple Podcasts. That is finally got approved for that. We're on Spotify. We are on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, YouTube. Basically anywhere that you need podcasts. Of course, if anybody that's listening, if there is a place that you would like to have this podcast at, either comment on a video on YouTube. My Instagram is in the description above or below, depending on whether what platform you're listening to this on. Enough of the plug. Let's get to the movie. We are watching again a League of Their Own, and without further ado, I might as well start the movie. And it's got that classic 90s Columbia Pictures logo on it. First off, I want to give a shout out. Good friend of mine, Shannon Wolf, recommended this movie to me. I was asking for movie suggestions for this podcast, and apparently this is one of her favorite movies, so I decided to oblige, and this is the first time I've watched this movie. I mean, I've watched it ahead of time in order to get ready for this commentary, But before this, I'd never seen this movie, and thus, in fact, I've never heard of the history of this movie. It's quite silly of me. I just realized that the volume was down. But anyway, the movies. So the interesting story behind A League of Their Own, just kind of a brief overview of what the movie is about a women's professional baseball league that was formed back in the early 40s during the time of World War II, and the professional baseball league known as the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, formed in 1943. And as the majority of this movie takes place in 1943. Right now we're in the present day, of course, present day being, probably the 90s, since this was made in 1992. And yeah, it's a bit of a fictional retelling of it. I mean, I'll be kind of going over some of the history of it. I'll be kind of going over some behind the scenes, info that I've kind of dug up in the past. So, but again, very good movie I'm here watching. Right now we are watching kind of an elderly woman, and we are watching basically her daughter, and apparently she's packing for some kind of reunion, and we later learned that this elderly woman's name is her name is Dottie Hinson, and you can definitely tell she's a little apprehensive to go to this reunion. Kind of sows a little bit of what's going to happen kind of later in the movie. It's kind of foreshadowing. She has a sister named Kit, a younger sister named Kit, and it kind of foreshadows that there's a little bit of a bit of a situation or an event that happens between them that kind of makes Dottie feel a little apprehensive to go to this reunion. Now, there's a really funny scene right here. First off, this movie, for any of you that have not seen it, first off, if you have not seen this movie, I definitely recommend going out and seeing this movie. It is a very good, I think, good retelling of a historical, very important time in, I think, our nation's history. But also, it's a really dang funny movie. It's got a lot of funny moments in it. You got this scene right here. You got a Dottie talking to her grandsons. She's basically telling her youngest grandson to basically beat the crud out of her out of his older brother in a game of pickup basketball. Interesting thing here. They have a lot of the opening credits at the beginning of the film, and apparently Hans Zimmer wrote the majority of the music. Which, Hans Zimmer, very famous for writing the music to Inception. Now, this little song playing over, they're showing Dottie on a bus, kind of going. I believe she had a plane ride, and then she had to catch a bus to, finally reach her reunion destination. And the song here, I forgot the name of this song. I literally just had it earlier this morning. What is this song? Yeah, Now and Forever by Carole King. There it is. But again, I really like this song. I actually thought at first it was by Madonna, but of course I don't really listen to Madonna's music very much. Shocker, I know. A bit of some kind of interesting trivia tidbits here. So they're showing Dottie going to a little village in New York called Cooperstown, New York, and that is the actual village and I believe it is technically a village where the National Baseball Hall of Fame is resided. And as we see kind of later at the end of this movie, Dottie and the girls are and the old players of the AAGPBL, who are currently at a reunion right now, are going to like this exhibit that they're opening up. And another interesting thing is that they're playing a pickup game on a field called Doubleday Field, which is named after Abner Doubleday, who was a Union general who is reported to have actually created the game of baseball. There was a kind of a myth surrounding the founding of baseball. However, it's been proven wrong. So now they're kind of going into a little bit of the back. They're starting to transition back to 1943. They're kind of transition. It's a little bit of the history of why the AAGPBL was kind of created. Obviously back in the day, this is 1943. Basically 2 years into about a year, and we got into the war about December 1941. So it was about a year into our involvement. And what they were showing was they had a lot of Major League Baseball players were getting either drafted or, enlisting voluntarily to go into the service. So Major League Baseball had quite a few of their players going into the services. And because of that, there was a little bit of a worry that, there'd be like teams that would, be folding because they didn't have enough players. And while the major league teams, they ultimately were able to stay open, and they were ultimately able to keep playing. A lot of smaller minor league teams actually were folded and actually were never able to recover. Again, another reason why they wanted to create the AAGPBL was again just try and keep. A lot of the stadiums were, they try to get as many people into the stadiums as possible. One of the things that the founder of the AAGPBL stated early on was that he wanted to try and fill up, have the girls' baseball teams play in the major league stadiums while the major league teams were playing at away stadiums. But apparently that didn't happen. None of the early teams in the AAGPBL, I believe, were in the same city as a Major League Baseball team. So now we've transitioned back to 1943. Introduced to Lori Petty as Kit Keller and Geena Davis as Dottie Hinson. Now it's very interesting bit of historical tidbittery. As I'm making up new words as I go along here. They're showing the girls playing soccer. Now I've been talking. I just said playing soccer, didn't I? They're playing softball. They are playing softball. I apologize. For the tongue slip. But they're showing the girls here playing softball, and as I've been talking about the All-American. It's this league that ultimately came to be was the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, and as a just kind of as a casual baseball fan and softball fan, I do know that there are very distinct rule differences. However, that they I can see how they people can see them as very similar games. Of course, I'd get a person that's really into softball or baseball that tells me it's two completely different games, but I don't really know it that well. But they're showing them playing softball, and the reality is this is actually historically accurate. When they're showing they're gonna show later here a scout going out to try and find women to play in this professional league. At the time, the only real organized sport that was at least comparable to baseball for women was softball. There wasn't a whole lot of women playing baseball around. Playing baseball either back in the day or even nowadays, unfortunately. So when the AAGPBL started off, it actually wasn't the AAGPBL. It actually was the All-American Girls Professional Softball League. I believe it was the AAGPSBL. It actually went through different names. I mean, it was the AAGPBBL, AAGP, SBL, or whatever. And again, but as a result of that, I mean, it started off. It was the league for the first couple years was a hybrid of baseball rules and softball rules. And one of the things that I learned was that, in baseball, you can get a big lead off. If anybody's ever watched a baseball game, you sometimes see, the pitcher, trying to throwing it back to back to the first baseman to try and keep, one of the runners on the runner on the base honest, because if they get caught off the base and they get tagged, it's an out. But they get to lead off, to the next base. But in softball, they can do that, which is actually something I learned. You learn something new every day. Actually, is what I say. But in the early days, it was a mix of baseball rules, essentially baseball rules with a little bit of a shorter diamond, it was fast, underhanded pitching with a bigger ball. In the early days of the AAGPBL, the field dimensions were not as similar to the major league baseball diamonds. Again, it was a bigger ball that they were playing with, more akin to a softball, and it was underhand pitching, more akin to softball. But as the league went on, the ball kept getting smaller. I believe the field dimensions got a little bit bigger. I can't completely confirm or deny that. And they finally, about 4 years in, they started switching to, I believe it was the fifth season that they played. They started switching to side-handed pitching, and then after that they went to a full-on like overhand pitching is what we know nowadays in baseball. So now we're being introduced to Jon Lovitz playing Ernie Campadino. He's the really greasy scout going all over the country trying to find women to play in the professional baseball league. And it's really funny. They're showing Dottie and Kit, milking the cow. One of the things that they said was Dottie and Kit are actually living out in, I believe, some really small rural town out in Oregon. And again, they obviously being out in a rural city, they live rural area. They're living out in a farm. The scout found them in the barn, milking the cows. There was a scene in which that I kind of talked over, in which they were walking home, and you kind of got a sense of their personalities. Kit's a bit more excitable, a little bit more rambunctious, and you kind of saw Dottie. You see Dottie kind of a little bit more steadfast, a little bit more. I don't want to say in control of her emotions. I mean, that kind of gives a negative connotation to Kit, but a little more easygoing is what I would say. But And I love this scene here because Jon Lovitz is just—it's really funny. Jon Lovitz, he gets like single named billing in the opening credits, which means that you're gonna have generally means you're gonna have an important role in this movie. However, he only was in the movie for about 15 or so minutes of actual screen time. Of course, a lot of people would say, I mean, and even in the early portions of the film, he actually was one of the funniest portions. In fact, actually, he had was scheduled to have a much bigger role, much larger role in the film. However, I think they kind of whittled his role down after test screenings, and they basically whittled his screen time down to only the funniest parts of his basically the funniest parts, and they had the parts in which would keep the people dying of laughter apparently. So now Kit is Kit is trying to convince Dottie to go into the league. Early on, Dottie's been saying, no, I'm a married woman, I don't want to go into the league. She's happy at what she is. And again, it really takes Kit to, again, it's kind of a good relationship with them. They both kind of push each other really, because Dottie's kind of comfortable in her own skin, and but Kit, Dottie's comfortable in her own skin, but she's a better baseball player than Kit. So it's kind of Kit to pushes Dottie to to try a little something new, and to try out this new baseball league, something that she didn't want to do. And as we see later on in the movie, Dottie pushes Kit to become a better baseball player. Something that Kit, she's, as you can early in these scenes, she definitely has a big chip on her shoulder from being Dottie's younger sister. And kind of in what she says is, she's being overlooked, and Dottie's out. It's kind of that stereotype of the younger sibling feels overlooked by her better older sibling. In fact, it's one of my favorite quotes in the movie actually, in which Kit and Dottie are walking home, and Kit's like, "Have you ever seen how Dad introduces us? This is our daughter Dottie, and this is our other daughter, Dottie's sister." And then this is one of my favorite lines in this movie. Now they're running to the train, trying to catch the train to go to Chicago. Now they scouted all kinds of women all over the United States, actually North America even. They had their players anywhere from the West Coast out in California to they had players out in Pennsylvania. I'm pretty sure even up to all over the East Coast even. Players even from the hometown of Chicago even. So they're showing them, they're hopping on a train going out to Chicago for the tryouts, which in reality was it was partially true, but also no, I would say it is true, because it technically what they considered when they had all the women kind of meet up in Chicago, in the real world of the All American Girls Professional Baseball League. At this time, technically a softball league in reality. They actually met at Wrigley Field, the home of the Chicago Cubs, for basically spring training. But during that spring training, women would be cut, and the teams got whittled down to what they would eventually become. Now this is a really interesting scene here. We're in Fort Collins, Colorado. Ernie Campadino is scouting a daughter of a baseball coach named Marla Hooch. And as we can see, Marla has been hitting, as what the young kids nowadays say, she's been hitting dingers out of the park. But the interesting thing about what just happened here is that Marla apparently is what is called a switch hitter. Basically what that means is that she can basically hit both, bat both, from the right and to the left side, basically bat both right-handed and left-handed. It's actually something, again, not knowing a whole lot about baseball, I had to kind of learn that, had to look up some baseball terminology to, find out about this movie. And again, in Jon Lovitz is, Ernie Campadino, one of the most likable guys that you can find, and I say that sarcastically, obviously, because he basically is about to turn Marla down because he doesn't think that she looks pretty enough for the league. And it's kind of a bit of a funny historical reference here. Jon Lovitz, Ernie Campadino says that, I can't take her. Look, you look at her and all that kind of stuff and blah blah blah. And Ernie's like, have you know who Omar Bradley is? And basically, the girls are like, yeah. He's like, yeah, it's too much of a resemblance. Which is a kind of at least for a history nut like myself, it's kind of a funny bit of a funny reference because Omar Bradley was a real World War II general, a very famous general actually over in the overseas. Worked for the famous George S. Patton. Then I believe he became George S. Patton's superior. The great General George S. Patton. There's also a great scene. Basically, what it showed is that Dottie and Kit, so Ernie was about to leave Marla behind, and she was just, you're not gonna go into the league, you're not pretty enough, that kind of thing. And one of my favorite parts of the movie, Dottie and Kit really stood up for Marla, and made sure that she'd be able to go into the league. So it was a great and even a great scene here. They're having a great scene with Marla and her dad, and even though they're only in a couple scenes together, not even a couple scenes, very I'd probably say about a minute or two of screen time together, but they have such a great relationship, and I think that's one of the great things I like about this movie is, the characters. Even though there are fictional characters, there's a great relationships that are being built between them. They have great chemistry together. Again, that's one of the main things I love about Dottie and Kit's relationship is the chemistry that the actresses Lori Petty and Geena Davis have on set, on screen. You get the sense that they would be real life sisters. In fact, I think Geena Davis even stated that during the filming, she even took Lori Petty. I think because this was one of Lori Petty's, first major film roles, and she kind of took Lori Petty under her wing and tried to act like the bigger sister to Lori Petty. But even as we get to know some of the other girls, they're starting the tryout scene here. As we get to know some of the other girls, they build such great relationships together, and for anybody that's ever played a team sport, that's one of the best things about playing baseball. The relationships that you build with your teammates. Well, not only just baseball, but any team sport, honestly. So they're finally made it to tryouts, and they're actually showing him being filmed on the actual Wrigley Field, known today as the home of the Chicago Cubs, known back in the 1943 as the home of the Chicago Cubs. However, in this movie, it's been renamed to Harvey Field. And now that is where I will get into a little bit more of the history of the original All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. Real quick before I do that, we are about to be introduced to Rosie O'Donnell as Doris and Madonna as All the Way May Morbido. And I love, just first introduction to Madonna, she's smoking a cigarette. But anyway, back to the founding members of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. I'll kind of hit on the two major, at least probably the two most famous ones that were, a part of the founding membership team. The first one, probably the main, and kind of the person who had the main idea, kind of, I believe the main financier, the famous Philip K. Wrigley, who at the time, 1943, at the time this was going on, owner of the Chicago Cubs, obviously the namesake of Wrigley Field, Philip K. Wrigley, and I'm pretty sure everybody also knows the famous Wrigley's chewing gum. He was also really important in getting some of that and establishing that. And then another famous general manager owner who was very instrumental to the founding of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League was a man by the name of Branch Rickey, who for a lot of not even just baseball historians but civil rights historians will, I think, take some kind of note in this as well. Branch Rickey was the man who pushed he was the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he was the one that pushed to have Jackie Robinson signed, which in effect in 1947 broke the color barrier of professional baseball. So not only did Branch Rickey, he was the main proponent to try and sign Jackie Robinson to the pros and ultimately try and break the color barrier, but he also was very instrumental in establishing, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. So that's actually something I didn't realize. I mean, I knew Branch Rickey because of his involvement in signing Jackie Robinson. To plug another movie here, the movie 42, I believe it was starring Chadwick Boseman, as Jackie Robinson, but also starred Harrison Ford as Branch Rickey, and so I guess most contemporary people, that's where they'd know Branch Rickey from. So now they're showing basically just a montage of tryout, the actresses going around playing baseball. Kit showing off her arm here. Dottie's about to show off how good of a catcher she is. The one thing is obviously these actresses, they had to learn a lot of baseball. In fact, they brought in real life members of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League in order to teach these women how to play baseball. In fact, a lot of them were brought on as what are called technical advisors for the movie. Apparently, they would play. Not only even that, they would practice, a lot during the day. They, obviously, for filming, they would have to play a lot of baseball games. But even when they were not filming, or probably even not on set, they were out playing a lot of baseball, playing a lot of games, practicing quite a bit, trying to really hone their craft down. So now they're finally starting to divvy out the teams. We now discover that there are 4 teams that will be playing this season, which is actually true to real life for the first season of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball, first All-American Girls Professional Softball League at the time. Later became the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. But, the first couple teams that in real life were created by the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League were the Kenosha Comets, the South Bend Blue Sox, the Racing Bells, as we will see later in the movie, and then the team that we, at least in this movie, that we follow most along with, the Rockford Peaches. So that's one part of the movie that they're actually very historically accurate about. Again, there are only 4, and as the league went on, they garnered more teams. I believe at its highest point, I believe there were 11 teams that were playing. But that first season, there were only 4 teams with about 15 players on it, 15 players total, which only they started off the spring training at Wrigley Field that first season with about 200 players, and they whittled it down to 60. And again, they say, in reality, they're saying that you're the first members of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League or the All-American Girls Baseball League, but at first, again, they were a hybrid softball and baseball league. I mean, and you never see them playing any kind of softball in this movie, which, again, is historically inaccurate. They started for the first 4 years playing underhand pitched, softball / baseball hybrid playing. So they're showcasing the new uniforms that the women would have to be playing in. And what it basically amounts to is that the women are wearing a dress while playing baseball. Now, this is actually a very important part of the All-American Girls, the history of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. Back in the day, it was uncommon for women to actually participate in wide-ranging athletic activities. And at the time, I mean, people are even stating that attributes that are attributed to playing competitive sports, competitive team sports, such as competition, toughness, that actually took away from a woman's ability to be wed and that kind of thing, that kind of thing. But and so the appearance, the ability, or the idea that the women would have to maintain a feminine appearance and really maintain a high sense of femininity, have good manners, they look good, they had to wear makeup at all times, they had very strict rules of conduct, they couldn't smoke or drink out in public. They actually had, we'll see later, they had team chaperones that basically approved all of their social activities and basically would enforce the femininity rules. And one of the things that they're showing here is the women in in Charm and Beauty School, and this actually did happen. Again, there was I believe the school was named the Helena Rubinstein Women Beauty School, and they were required to go to the school. They're required to maintain these charm and beauty classes. And again, as I say, they had to wear basically like on all bus rides and whatnot. They had to wear makeup and be wearing dress. They had to wear skirts that were a certain length above their knees, but again, overall maintaining that image of high feminine strict femininity. I mean, they didn't want any women wearing these clothes that a boy would wear. They wanted them to portray them as ladies. That they're, even though that they're playing a competitive sport, they're still ladies. As some people might consider that backwards, but again, that was the thinking back in the 1940s. So now we're getting introduced to two pretty important characters here. We're being introduced to, first off, the owner, at least in this universe, in this movie, the founder of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, the man Walter Harvey, who obviously is based on Philip K. Wrigley. I mean, I remember Philip K. Wrigley, the chewing gum magnate, and Walter Harvey in this movie, he's what they call the candy bar magnate. He basically creates candy bars. Basically, as he's like Willy Wonka, honestly, except without the top hat and massive chocolate factory. But another character we're being introduced to right now is a man by the name of Jimmy Dugan, and Walter Harvey essentially is offering Jimmy a spot as the manager of the Rockford Peaches. And again, interesting thing, same with Walter Harvey, who's based on a real life person. Jimmy Dugan was not a real life character. I mean, he's based off of a real life Hall of Fame baseball player, man by the name of Jimmy Fox, actually, who I believe, I forget which team he played for, but I mean, he was apparently a well-known, well-respected hitter. As they say that Jimmy Dugan here was a very good. He hit a lot of home runs. Apparently, they show it even later in the film. And even Jimmy Fox, I mean, he for one season managed a All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. it wasn't the Rockford Peaches in the first season like Jimmy is doing here, but again, the similarities are there. In fact, in the first season, I believe for the first season, the manager of the Rockford Peaches was a man by the name of Eddie Stumpf, Stumpf. Really solid nickname, or a solid last name there. And so again, and not a whole lot really known on him. I mean, he was a pretty solid baseball player. But again, I mean, he not as famous as they made Jimmy Dugan out here. I mean, they're basically making Jimmy Dugan out to be a kind of a very famous, disgraced, very popular baseball player. But as they're seeing here, he really doesn't like the idea of having to coach women's baseball. I mean, he's obviously very misogynistic. Now, this is a really funny scene here. He's taking a leak in the women's locker room. It's really funny there. They actually show Madonna's character May like getting a watch and starting to time how long he's taking it. Actually, one of the funny behind-the-scenes moments here, the director, Penny Marshall, who this movie, kind of a bit of a family affair. Penny Marshall's daughter and brother were both actors and actresses in this, had some pretty good roles in this movie. But and Penny Marshall obviously was the director, and apparently this scene in which Jimmy is taking a leak, which I believe he's taking a leak into the sink, to be quite honest with you. I don't even think that's a urinal. I can't really tell, but basically he had Tom Hanks had to basically act like he was taking a leak, and basically it was Penny Marshall off camera had a water hose, and basically she was like pouring the water out, and basically Tom Hanks had to kind of act to that. Again, a bit of the famous movie magic there, as some might say. Bit of an interesting development here. We are starting to Dottie's kind of take, again, with Jimmy not really taking charge of the team, not really taking control of the team. Dottie's starting to take over, and according to from what I've seen, Dottie later became the assistant manager. I mean, we even see Jimmy here. We see Jimmy here really starting to, later on in the movie when he actually starts, really caring about them, about actually coaching the team, which he eventually will. But him and Dottie develop quite a good relationship, working relationship actually. So out become the Rockford Peaches, starting their first baseball game. A couple things you see here. It's a very sparsely attended crowd. Not a whole lot of people attending the games. Yeah, they're basically showing everybody laughing at the women. Which, I mean, the league, I don't believe was at when it first started off, I don't believe it was this unpopular. I believe it started that first season. Even they drew quite a few crowds. I mean, of course, for a first league, it may have been for a first year league. Maybe the first for the first I don't know, like maybe first couple games. I mean, maybe it took some time to get the word out and get some of the crowds out. But they drew some pretty good sized crowds that first season of the All American Girls Professional Baseball League in real life. And at least not into the sense in which they had basically a whole bunch of empty stands. And again, I can't neither confirm nor deny that you would have, basically jackholes, kind of, hooting and hollering and heckling the girls. Basically got this guy up on the dugout that's kind of hooting and hollering, and they had one of the, I believe the first basewoman actually kind of threw the guy. No, she's the shortstop. That's the shortstop. But they basically kind of showed her throwing a ball and knocking him off the dugout roof. and they're playing the game here. Jimmy is basically just off in a corner, scratching himself and not even paying attention to the game. It's really interesting. Tom Hanks for this movie, and I even noticed it when watching it, but he had to gain quite a bit of weight for it. I noticed that in some of his earlier movies, this is the early '90s. Some of the earlier movies that he portrayed in the, early, in the late '80s and even some of the mid '80s actually. He was a lot skinnier than what he looks in here, and apparently he had to, the director told him that, you have to, he had to gain the 30 pounds, and apparently he spent a lot of his time, eating at a Dairy Queen and, eating a barbecue short ribs, which you can definitely tell he's got a lot of pudge on his, face and body. And then obviously Jimmy's trying to, wash himself off because he's just not, again, Jimmy is a bit of an alcoholic. I love is Ira Lowen. So Ira Lowenstein here, basically is the man in the top, kind of the uptight man in the top hat and the circled glasses. Basically talking to Jimmy about Jimmy. He kind of was saying how he was kind of making fun of Jimmy for basically how he just wasn't really even paying attention to the team. So, and Jimmy's even saying here, he's basically just saying, how ridiculous he feels the situation is. He's like, I don't have ball players, I have girls, and he takes a big wad of tobacco and spits it at Mr. Lowenstein's feet. So again, you kind of see, where Jimmy stands. I mean, he just doesn't really take any of this seriously. So now this is kind of an interesting segment of the film here. They're showing, obviously a fake. They're showing a fake newsreel of kind of black and white footage of the actresses. Basically kind of what looks like like a newsreel footage that they would make for movies, for like what they called Nickelodeons or movie theaters back in the days. Bit of an old school, terminology. But one of the things that I find this really interesting is that these are really doctored. These are really staged and doctored, like footage. And they're showing the women, they're knitting in the dugout, and they're showing them like pouring tea for the umpires, and they're showing them, making sure that, that, again, it's all about, maintaining that image of femininity and, making sure that they look and act like ladies and all that kind of thing. And again, it kind of goes back to, this is, some could view, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League as a bit of propaganda, for the United States back in the day. Look at how, our women, look how, tough they are playing, that our ladies, they could be, they could be both in the house and, play, a tough game of baseball. So, again, that's just kind of, the way it was back in, those days. I mean, this was just this type of, women's athletics, just wasn't as around as it was. I mean, and even nowadays, women's athletics are not nearly as popular as men's athletics. But back in this day, it was completely unheard of that you'd have women playing professional baseball, or they're actually women being paid to play professional sports, because it just wasn't a part of the culture back in the day. So this is really. So this scene here, I kind of highlight it because it's a bit of a pattern that I see throughout the film. So basically, Evelyn, who I believe Evelyn plays in the left field, because I know that May plays in center field. I forget which. I know Evelyn's one of the outfielders, but she's basically telling Jimmy that she needs to basically bring her son on the next bus ride. And Jimmy doesn't really say anything. He obviously just doesn't care. And I highlight this because Evelyn and Jimmy have two more conversations later in the film that highlight Jimmy. It kind of highlights Jimmy's like growing relationship, with the women, and kind of highlight his growth as a character. And obviously, I realized that as I watched the film a few other times. So now we get to meet Evelyn's wonderful young son, known as Stillwell, wearing a sailor's outfit. I mean, he's obviously wearing something that, a kid back in the 1940s would wear. And obviously, he got the fat kid, stereotype because he's wearing basically because he's kind of a pudgy kid, and he's basically got a whole bunch of chocolate all over his, face. And Madonna's character is, grabbing a baseball bat. He's like, Evelyn, I'm going to kill your son. And Evelyn is like, Stillwell, Angel, have another chocolate, and his face just lights up, and Stillwell's one of my favorite characters of this movie. Gimme, gimme, gimme. Oh my gosh, it's so hilarious. And then Dottie has a great reaction to it. And Dottie's like, I can't wait to have many more like him. Actually, at this point, Dottie actually doesn't have any children, so. So now again, the women are outside of the bus smoking, which again, they quickly hide it when their team chaperone comes up and is like, she's like, oh, they need to hide it from her because, their team chaperone is very, oh my goodness. Basically, they're talking about how, they're actually kind of putting some kind of a drug into their team chaperones, like either drink or something to make her sick so they can sneak out later. Which actually, team chaperones were around in the first were around for the All American Girls Professional Baseball League. Again, as I stated earlier, they had to basically the team chaperones, they basically were in charge of they were in charge of the team's social activities, making sure that they were all okayed by the league, making sure she enforced the rules of of femininity and high mannerisms that the women had to portray, both like even in private and in the public. Which is why the women are trying to make her sick so that they can sneak out and have a good time, because apparently they haven't been able to do that in a while. It's really funny because it's all the younger ladies on the team and all the basically single women, so. Of course, Dottie being a married woman, she would. And obviously, Dottie as a character, she has no interest in going out. So again, they're showing them going out to a bar here, which it's kind of funny because they're showing Madonna's character May, who. I actually realized was based on a real life All American Girls Professional Baseball player, woman by the name of Faye Dancer, who actually will come into play a little bit later in the film here. But May's name here is all the way May, for reasons I shan't talk about. But and Faye Dancer's nickname was all the way Faye. So, and apparently they were very outgoing, very rambunctious, women, girls back in those days, and even there's stories that Faye Dancer would she would even sneak drinks and cigarettes out to cemeteries, so that the women could not be so stuffy, to where they can actually start drink and smoke and whatnot. So this is kind of a funny, interesting bit of dialogue here. Rosie O'Donnell's character Doris is kind of explaining how she and May met and became real good friends, and apparently Rosie Doris, the character, her father owned basically owned like a bar, like a club upstate, and Madonna's character was one of the dancers for that club, and Rosie O'Donnell, Doris's character, Doris, basically was one of the bouncers for the club, and again, that's why they're such good friends, and that's why they have that good relationship. So I will say Madonna really shines in this scene here. I mean, she's got some really great dance moves, which of course I'm pretty sure that's what Madonna would. I'm pretty sure Madonna in real life would have that. So okay, this really really short scene here. So Dottie's getting dropped off at the bar by some young kid who I swear is not even close to 16. And he's trying to put the moves on Dottie, and Dottie's as Dottie would, she's letting him down, or kind of rebuffing his advances. So interesting thing about Madonna behind the scenes in this movie is she apparently had a really miserable time making this movie. She did not have a good time. According to stories, she wasn't making any friends on set. She was writing all kinds of letters to people that were stating, oh, these actresses are all athletes and I'm not an athlete. I can't do this. And she was, I don't want to say complaining. I don't want to badmouth her, but again, that's just kind of the stories I've been hearing, is that she just didn't have a good time while making the film. And even like for some of the last scenes in the movie, during the championship series, they were filming out in Evanston, Illinois, and apparently Madonna was so nasty, and she treated the citizens and the hotel staff and basically all the people out there just so nasty that even to this day, the city of Evanston, Illinois, just doesn't hold Madonna in the highest regard. Although on a similar regard, Madonna doesn't really regard them in the highest light as well. So now Dottie has showed up to the bar, and they are basically making sure that they don't get caught. Because very strict rules for this league in real life, and they would, I'm pretty sure they would have no hesitations of kicking women out if they didn't adhere to those rules. And I love this scene here because it's Marla's, at this point, she's been really quiet, and basically what they said is, they had to put a whole bunch of booze in her and put her in a dress, and she got up on the stage and started singing, I believe, Frank Sinatra, slow jam songs. And it's showing her catching the attention of a gentleman in the audience. I believe a gentleman by the name of Nelson, I believe, who we find out his name later. And interestingly, they get married later. So okay, that's another funny scene. It's a really short scene, really insignificant to the overall movie, but they're showing Jimmy Dugan basically just batting practice, and they're showing this old-fashioned batting machine, pitching machine actually. It basically had like an arm attached to a rotating gear, and basically the arm would catch. Basically, there was a feeder that fed the arm baseballs, and it basically would fling the ball at home plate, trying to emulate what an actual pitch would be. Actually, to be quite honest with you, it's a little historically inaccurate from what I've read, because the pitching machine that they showed in the movie here was not created until 1952, and this movie is taking place in 1943. Now they're showing Madonna. Again, May's character just hit a triple. And another interesting thing, behind the scenes with Madonna in this movie is she apparently wasn't the best baseball player on the team. Actually, apparently she really struggled with trying to pick up the finer points and the finer ins and outs. She really improved. You can tell that she really improved. As the game went, as it went along. But apparently Madonna couldn't pick up the game quick enough, so she actually moved her character, May Mortabito, from third base to center field. The thing with third base is you have to be able to field a whole bunch of ground balls, and Madonna just couldn't get the hang of fielding those ground balls. A little bit of comedy here. They're showing Jimmy They're showing Jimmy and Dottie, giving batting signals to Marla, who again is been shown as the best, best batter on the team. So, and then Jimmy's you kind of see that Jimmy's actually starting to really, take an interest in the game. And Dottie kind of called him out for it. You kind of see a little bit of a harsher side to Dottie, which that's kind of funny, actually. Yeah, the interesting thing about Dottie, at least the actress that plays Dottie, Geena Davis, when I was watching this movie, I was almost really certain that I had seen her, acting in another movie before. And what I realized, and I actually looked it up later, is that she actually was the mom, played the mom in Stuart Little and Stuart Little 2. Actually more watched Stuart Little 2 when I was growing up. All right, where are we at? So we're in a scene. The team is on a bus ride, probably more than likely to their next game. What is she reading? So the interesting thing about this scene here is there's a member of the team who is actually illiterate. We figured that out when in the first scene in which they were dividing the teams up, and oh my gosh! And apparently Madonna's given Madonna's character May has given her something pretty steamy to read. I don't know what they were saying, but no, again, it's a really good scene here because you're really showing the bond of these women and the bond of them becoming teammates. And because again, you had that woman who we found out is illiterate. May is teaching her how to read, and Doris, played by Rosie O'Donnell, is basically showing the girls her boyfriend, and basically just complaining about how he's like, well, he treats me bad. Well, the good thing is he's unemployed and he treats me bad. So, this is actually really fun because the actresses give such great performances in this movie. Lori Petty's great. Geena Davis is really good. Rosie, Madonna, they're all such great actresses in this movie. And the interesting thing about it is I believe this is Rosie O'Donnell's first major film appearance. Obviously she had been in television and as a stand-up comedian before. However, this was really her first major film role at the time. And I tell you what, she knocks it out of the park. And that was no pun intended there. You might think it was. Now, this interesting scene here, again, this is the second interaction scene with Evelyn and Jimmy. And Jimmy is kind of starting to berate Evelyn, starting to yell at her about how she doesn't know how to, basically throw to the pickoff man. Which I believe, Evelyn being in the outfield, if you're in the outfield, you either throw to the pickoff man, who would either be, the second base, third base, or second base, shortstop, or third base. Again, I don't know the ins and outs of baseball to really explain it that well, but he starts yelling at Evelyn, and she starts crying, and this is where the famous "There's no crying in baseball" scene happens. And the thing that it kind of notices about this scene is it shows a growth in Jimmy's character. And while he's still kind of, what many would consider an a-hole, is he's starting to care a little bit more about his players. But again, there hasn't been. But again, the relationship just hasn't been built yet to where he knows exactly how to talk to them, and he knows how to coach them. With any coach in any team athletics, in team sports, there's a way. Building those relationships is really key to being a good coach of that specific team. And what they're showing here now is that Jimmy, he's starting to care a little bit more, but he hasn't. But the players don't really respect him as much, and they're not really. He hasn't built that good relationship with them yet. And as we see, as the movie goes along, and we see obviously, he builds that relationship. He becomes a real good coach for the team. But right now it's again, he's kind of in that growing phase. Now it's another interesting scene here. So Ira Lowenstein, who we know is the general manager of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. So this scene, two things that he's going to state here. He basically states that Dottie. He basically tells Dottie that, hey Dottie, I've picked you to be, a part of a Life magazine, a Life photographer, a Life magazine, article, and to be a human interest story and that kind of thing. And he also states to them that, we really need to hope for a turnaround here because, again, the people weren't coming to the games, they weren't making enough money to keep the league afloat, and obviously the business side, if you don't have enough money to keep the league afloat, because and as we're looking into the stands here behind them, there are not a whole lot of people there. And going into so kind of going back to Dottie here, he's even saying Dottie's the face of the league, and he even said I'm calling you the Queen of Diamonds. You're the best player in the league. Dottie Hinson in this movie is not a real life character. She's based on kind of an amalgamation of all different kinds of All-American Girls professional baseball players. Basically, two players that I'll kind of highlight here. A woman by the name of Dottie Kamenchek, who a lot of people would consider to be one of the best, All-American Girls professional baseball players, that ever played. Apparently, she had some really ridiculous at-bat statistics that that rivaled even some of the best players in the majors at the time. And then there was another player. Wait 1 second here. And Dottie Kamenchek played for the Rockford Peaches, the same team that Dottie Hinson plays for. Except in this movie, Dottie Hinson is a catcher. And now they're showing Dottie caught a foul ball, which resulted in an out for the other team, and she had to slide into a split to catch the foul out. And some behind-the-scenes magic on that, Dottie, Geena Davis apparently could do the splits, but she couldn't slide into the splits, which basically, I believe, required a male... I think, stunt double in order to actually, slide into the split. And then obviously it showed, Geena Davis's face, catching the ball. Now they're showing a little montage here. Another interesting scene there. They got showing the girls playing. They're showing the girls praying in the dugout, praying at a church, and Jimmy's like, "All right, let's go," and he's basically just saying, "Hey, we have God knows that we have a game coming up," and he basically doesn't take it very seriously. Although he also does show him right at the end, kind of doing a little bit of the the father son, kind of cross on himself and pointing up to the cross up at the church. So. And it's also showing, it's kind of an interesting thing. Jimmy's, developing. He doesn't really know the girls' names yet, so he's like requiring, like, hey Dottie, what's her name? It's like, hey you tall girl. It's like, oh, her name's Beverly. It's like, hey Beverly, and blah blah blah. So again, a bit of a growth in Jimmy's character there. And again, they're showing the crowd starting to really pick up for some of these games here. Again, I mean, the league was very popular. The actual league, the first season was very popular. I mean, they garnered a lot of quite a few attendance into the stands. And one of the things that they tried to do was put, if they couldn't get to these major league stadiums and put them in these major cities, they put them in stadiums in cities that didn't have access to Major League Baseball, and in that regard, I mean these leagues would be extremely popular because these were areas which didn't have didn't have access to baseball. So now they just showed a really interesting scene here, which not only is a part of the sports history, but also the civil rights history of sports. Basically, there was a foul ball that kind of went out into the side of the field there, and they showed an African American woman going up to the ball, and Dottie, Geena Davis's character, Dottie Henson's basically telling her, throw it here, just nice catch. And this woman, I mean, she winds up and throws it a long way, good throw. And the one of the catchers, even says, "Ouch, that was a tough throw there." And one of the interesting things about that scene and about the history behind that scene is that the original All-American Girls Professional Baseball League didn't have African American women playing baseball. They even showed in the movie here. I mean, they showed her and other African Americans sitting in the colored only section of the stadium, and that little snippet of scene there is the director included it because she acknowledged the fact that this segregation, existed back in the day, and she even stated that she was really disappointed that she couldn't have a diverse cast of women playing baseball. And because if you notice in this movie, it is all white women playing baseball. There's no African Americans and nobody of any kind of color playing. And again, it goes back to the segregation of sports that they just didn't have access. African Americans just didn't have the opportunities to play these major sports back in the day. And again, going back to Branch Rickey, this is 1943. It would be about 4 more years until Jackie Robinson started for the Brooklyn Dodgers and ultimately broke the color barrier. Allowing African Americans to enter into professional baseball. So now they've gone into a little bit of a bus. They're back on the bus. They're obviously traveling to their next game, and it's kind of Dottie and Jimmy are just exchanging photographs and pictures. Dottie's telling Jimmy about her husband Bob, who's overseas right now, and he's going to be the manager of the dairy farm, and he's a really smart guy. Jimmy's telling her about how he can't go into the armed forces because he doesn't have enough cartilage in his knee, so he basically just gets denied if he tries to sign up for it. And it's kind of the funny thing about it is that while you had a lot of Major League Baseball players enlisting into the services, a lot of them were denied entry for one reason or the other. That there was that the stamp. You have the stamp on the forms, and there was a code that a code that basically the government would give you. And I think the only codes that I really know would be 1A, which basically means that you're good to enlist, and you're good, you can enlist into the services. Or they would and they would have all these other codes, but the only other code that I would know of is the code 4F, which basically denied you access to the armed services. And apparently, according to what I've been reading, there were a lot of Major League Baseball players that attempted to enlist in the services and got denied, and for one reason or another. Again, the years of playing baseball had kind of whittled down their physical their physical their bodies, because again, baseball, it can be a tough sport. Even back in the 40s, when it was even tougher to play. So now, interesting thing, as I alluded to earlier, Dottie and Jimmy, they show them building this really good relationship with each other. Obviously, the manager of the team and the team's best player. But it was going to go a lot deeper than that. Apparently, there was a storyline that was suggested, but not, it ultimately got, cut from the final film, was Jimmy and Dottie ultimately became romantically involved, or they got, there even was a deleted scene in which Geena Davis and Tom Hanks were, filmed, kissing each other. And I don't know the real reason why, but ultimately, the storyline was cut, and they did not become they never become romantically involved in this movie, which I say I'm a bit more of a fan of. I actually kind of like Jimmy just not getting romantically involved in his players and just being a coach. So now a really interesting scene here. They're showing Jimmy going out. Jimmy going out to the mound. He called a timeout, and basically whenever you see a manager in a baseball team do this, basically means that he's going to pull his catcher out of the game. And obviously they're showing Kit on the mound pitching. She's starting to kind of give up a couple hits and starting to kind of lose her edge. And the interesting thing about this is that Kit, they're pulling Kit out. And Kit is, taking it really tough, and she's really, like shocked and aghast by it, and she obviously really upset at Dottie for that. But the interesting thing that I learned is that starting pitchers back in the 40s, and probably even earlier than that, earlier than the 40s, even perhaps the 50s, they were expected to finish their games out. Expected to pitch, the whole either, I don't know if they were playing, 6 innings here, they're playing the whole 9 innings, probably, if they were playing, rules nowadays, which obviously, in today's baseball is unheard of. You only get pitchers that pitch, if they pitch a full game, that's a real big deal. So, they only pitch probably at most, 7.5, innings, possibly even, up to the 8th inning, and then they finally get, pulled for a relief pitcher or the closer or their closing pitcher during the 9th inning. Now they're showing a little interesting scene here between Ira Lowenstein, the general manager of, at least in this fictional world, of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, and he's having a conversation with Walter Harvey about. And Walter Harvey is basically saying that, yeah, I'm thinking about, pulling the plug on the league. Even though it's doing, and as the montage went on that we just finished up, the league's showing to be really popular. There's a lot of people at the games now, but he's basically even saying that, we don't really need these women playing baseball anymore. The war effort's turning. Major League Baseball hasn't been shut down. It's still going. President Roosevelt stated that when he's not going to shut down men's baseball. All of this is based in reality. I mean, while I don't think the actual All-American Girls Professional Baseball League was ever in any kind of doubt of shutting down or getting during the first season, one of the things that I always read is that the amount of people that attended the games made it so that they would bring back another year of baseball. And he even stated, that President Roosevelt, stated that men's baseball wouldn't be shut down. Franklin Roosevelt, the president during World War II, he was very famous letter that he wrote to, baseball commissioners, baseball, owners, in which he essentially was pleading with them about how, they needed to keep baseball running and how, important it was as a pastime in order to keep, morale up, for not only the people at home, but obviously for the troops abroad, in this, in the total war effort, that was going on during World War II. So, but again, it's, what they were saying there, that while they're winning the war, men's baseball didn't have to be shut down, and, Franklin Roosevelt, wants to keep it going. That all, actually happened. That was all based in reality. Of course, it didn't mean that, it didn't mean that, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, would have been shut down, because I don't think it actually had any, actual real chance of shutting down. Real interesting scene here. Kit, Doris, played by Rosie O'Donnell, starting to kind of give Kit, kind of talk a little bit of trash to Kit. Obviously a little bit of fun-natured talk, but as you see, Kit's really really emotional, and as you can see, really wears her emotions on her sleeve. And, obviously she's this shower scene, she's really hammy acting. She's just like, and I don't know. I just found it really funny, but they got into a bit of a argument there, and they started to fight, and then Tom Hanks, Jimmy Dugan had to pull them apart, and basically he threw her into the shower and just kind of turned the water on, and basically said, "Cool down, you stay down there and cool off," and all this kind of stuff. And then again, it's just kind of showing the kind of growing strain on Dottie and Kit's relationship. Kit even stated that Dottie even treated her like a kid, like a baby. And again, one of the things about this movie that I always kind of laughed at. Originally, I was going to a bit of a criticism of the movie, but as I went along, it wasn't really a criticism. It's just kind of something I kind of laugh at a little bit. But to me, Kit acts like a child. I know she's obviously really young at the time of this movie, and she's the younger sister. But I would have thought being a professional athlete, which now she is a professional athlete, she would have been acted like a little bit more of an adult instead of just acting basically like a child. And she's basically just in which she's picking fights over kind of honestly something that just as kind of stupid as mindless trash talk from your teammates or whatnot. I will admit though, the one criticism I do have of Lori Petty is the scene in which Tom Hanks dumps her into the shower, and it's like her yelling and like it's like really it's classic overacting at its finest there. And it's kind of like, part of my whole thing with Kit is she's really, again, as I stated earlier, she wears her emotions on her sleeve, and while sometimes that's a good thing, a lot of times in this movie, it holds her back, and it can kind of see, it holds her, she's just can't really, see how much, fun she's actually having, and I'll kind of state later, how she realizes how much, how, she, likes having, Dottie likes having fun, while, Kit really ultimately takes it too seriously. But again, the thing with Kit is, she has like that really big chip on her shoulder, and you really want to root for her. You really want to you want to, like, be, oh my god, you want to root for Kit and, feel good about her, her arc and her story. But again, I mean, it's for me at least, it's a little Kit loses a little bit of sympathy points, when she's acting like a little bit like a brat and a little bit like a child. And again, it's nothing against Lori Petty. I mean, she does a great job in this movie. I mean, I just kind of wished it wasn't a little bit as overreactive. She basically just throws a ball almost through Dottie's, face and busts out a window behind her, and she's just like, you're this and that, you're the reason I'm being held back and blah blah blah, and I just feel like it's just being over dramatic, honestly. I never had, a similar, gendered sibling. I mean, I'm, all I've had are sisters, and, I never knew how, like, similar gendered siblings actually fight here. And, I don't know, like, I even, like, with all the, arguments that I'd have with my sister, I mean, to be an adult and still, argue like this, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just seems a little bit too, at least to me, a little unrealistic. I mean, again, it isn't unrealistic because, humans are, real, emotions are a real thing, and, it can get, especially, I mean, for a woman, especially for a person like Kit, which I identify with that, with Kit, she, that idea that, you need to prove, basically everybody wrong. You need to prove yourself to everybody. The idea that, you have a chip on your shoulder. I identify with that, and I really like that about Kit. It's just unfortunately, these fights with, her Dottie and basically these, these outbreaks here. It just seems a little unnecessary. Again, I mean, people are different. People, people. I mean, live and let live. I mean, it's just, something that I'm always like, just if you can only just I mean, she's just letting her emotions just get into the way a little bit too much. And I know sports are a really emotional game, and you can get really competitive, but again, there are times where you just have to, keep your emotions, in check in order to, keep your head, in the game, that kind of thing. So apparently they're singing this little All-American Girls Professional Baseball, like, kind of chant song. And apparently this was the real, theme song to the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. I mean, they even show real-life footage of the All-American, of reunions of the AAGPBL. And, they're singing this... they're singing, this, same song here. Oh, Stillwell. Stillwell is just being really cute and hilarious, as he always is. So, now we're about to enter a bit of a sad scene, bit of, a tragic scene. Where basically what's going to happen is there's going to be somebody from the post office that stops by, and he's going to hand a telegram off to one of the women from the War Department, and it's basically informing them that obviously somebody that they know, one of their loved ones, had passed away. I don't really like saying the word cliche because, I mean, it's such a negative connotation, but, I mean, I believe, at least for any movie that's set during World War II, it's a bit of a cliche to have this scene in which you have a telegram delivered, to a family member or to a loved one that basically states, hey, your loved one has been killed in action. Which, I mean, the thing is, I mean, it did happen, and, I mean, I'd say this is a good cliche because, I mean, it showcases the true loss of, men in World War II. Because, I mean, this did happen to, wives. This did happen to loved loved ones, family members, all that kind of thing. the interesting thing about this is that there was an actual there was a player in the All American Girls Professional Baseball League who lost a not a husband but a fiance to overseas in World War II. Again, as I stated earlier, the woman by the name of Faye Dancer, who was obviously was the inspiration for who was the inspiration for Mae, Madonna's character, and her fiance got lost overseas. So I mean, this idea that the women of the league would be directly affected by the directly affected by the war. I mean, that it's steeped in fact, and I mean, I'm pretty sure. I mean, there were hundreds of women that played. I'm pretty sure a lot of them had a lot of family members that passed away overseas. So I can imagine that I don't know if it was a common occurrence, but I could imagine that it happened to more than one woman in the league who had a husband that was overseas. Really interesting scene here. You're seeing, obviously Dottie's, crying, really upset, because again, her husband's overseas, and she just saw, one of her teammates lose their husband. So they were pretty upset by it. But again, it's kind of, because again, Dottie's been really obviously in control of her emotions, in comparison to Kit during this movie. So, and again, kind of seeing her crying, there's a little bit outside of left field there. Again, no pun intended on that one. So now we are introduced to Bob Henson, Dottie's husband, played by the great Bill Pullman. For those of you that don't know, Bill Pullman, probably more famous for his role as Lone Star in the movie Spaceballs, and also as the President of the United States in Independence Day. But now he is back, and he had a pretty nasty leg injury from a sniper overseas. So now, since Bob has returned, Dottie has to make a decision. During the entire movie, Dottie had been talking about how she's oh, that's a cute line. But again, as Dottie stated earlier in the film, when Bob came back, they would ultimately, she would ultimately, leave the team. And obviously, as she's stating here, she's got bigger priorities than playing baseball. She wants to start a family with Bob, start their lives together. And it just so happens that he returns on the eve of their championship game. Oh, and Tom Hanks is yelling again. Oh my goodness, Tom. Sorry, I'm just laughing at Tom Hanks' yelling here. I will admit, Tom Hanks was kind of funny. When he played, little interesting fact here, it's actually a bit of a preview for another movie I'm going to do. Eventually I'm going to do a Toy Story, which Tom Hanks plays Woody, but apparently Tom Hanks thought he was yelling the entire time when he was playing Woody in Toy Story. Which I feel like he should have done the same when he was doing this. I'm going to take a real quick break real quick. I will be right back. And we are back. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. So now we are in the scene. So again, as I was stating earlier, Tom Hanks was kind of yelling at his players. Jimmy Dugan was yelling at his players. Tom Hanks as Jimmy Dugan was yelling at his players. And this is the scene in which he realizes that Dottie is leaving the team and going back to Oregon with her husband Bob. And again, he gives speaking to the great relationship that they've started to build over the course of this movie. Jimmy kind of gives her a bit of a pep talk, basically about how as much as she doesn't show it. I mean, he basically I believe tells her what is ultimately the truth about how ultimately Jimmy is telling her how even though she doesn't show it very well, she doesn't show it at all, actually, that, she actually really likes playing baseball. Baseball is, what really kind of, lights your fire, kind of lights that fire in you, and, you're a great ball player. If you don't play the rest of this, game, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life, and kind of all that good thing. I mean, again, he's a little forceful with her. I mean, again, it's a bit of that, Tom Hanks is, pretty rugged, rugged around the edges, and he kind of, but he's really heartfelt in it. You really tell by this point, he really, you really tell that he cares about Dottie in this scene, and he even states, one of the things that, one of the very most common quotes in all of sports. Dottie states, baseball, it just got too hard for her, which, I mean, obviously it didn't. But, Jimmy replies, if it was an easy, it's supposed to be hard. If it's an easy sport, if it's an easy thing to do, then everybody would do it. Again, as, lots of people in sports world, feel that way, so. I think it's a good, I don't know, I just really like the scene. I mean, it's a great indication of the growth of Jimmy's relationship, And there's also another scene with him and Evelyn coming up here that I've, kind of mentioned earlier in the film, that he really, learns how to, care about his players. I mean, maybe not in the greatest sense of the word, I mean, but he can tell that he's gotten a lot better at it. So now we are finally in the World Series. In this game, it is the Racine Bells versus the Rockford Peaches, which is actually not the real life World Series of 1943 and the first World Series. The first World Series, a couple differences. First off, the teams. In the first World Series, I believe it was the Kenosha Comets versus the Racine Bells. So, I mean, they got one team right. Racine actually won that first World Series game. In fact, they actually swept Kenosha in 3 games, which is different from what they're showing here. They're showing a best-of-7 series. But that first World Series of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League was a best-of-5 series. And, best-of-7, you have to win 4 games. Best-of-5, you only have to win 3. And, Racine, they swept them in those first 3 games, So it didn't come down to the last game as it's showing right now. So also a great little intro to the scene here. Tom Hanks comes in. He basically gives us like 10 all right. So he basically is Matthew McConaughey before Matthew McConaughey is what I'm saying there. And you see another great growth of Jimmy's character is that he wants to lead the girls in a prayer here, which again, as we noticed even earlier in the film, he was, come on, hurry up, the God knows that we have a baseball game to play today. Even though the prayer, for some, it might be a little rough around the edges, but again, it's the thought that counts. So the start of the World Series game here. Again, you even get the girls in the prayer. They're starting to look at Jimmy a little. Starting to look at him a little funny, a little weird. No, it's... Now, the interesting thing about this is you don't see Dottie in any of these scenes. And, of course, Dottie went back to Oregon. And I don't... And we're going to find out Dottie's going to somehow sneak her way back into the... sneak her way back onto the field. And apparently she came back to play the last game. Of course, and right now we're listening to the national anthem. The national anthem. Listen to the national anthem. You got the girls lined up. Not a whole lot to talk about really in these scenes. I mean, they're just kind of... Yeah. As you can tell, I'm stalling because there's not a whole lot to talk about in these early scenes here. It's right before the game. I mean, honestly, I don't have a whole lot really left to talk, maybe historically, and at least for these World Series games. I mean, there's not a whole lot that I could find out about the actual the first World Series of the AAGPBL. I always mess that acronym up. And then Tom Hanks is still yelling at Stillwell. Oh, this is the scene in which Dottie... Yep, and then Dottie stands up and reveals herself to Jimmy. And Jimmy's like, "Where did you come from?" Although it's kind of odd, you know what I mean? You coming out, showing up to play the last game of the World Series. I mean, it's definitely a bit of an odd occurrence in professional sports. However, Jimmy's great relationship with Dottie and the great respect that they have for each other. I mean, it's obviously something that they're gonna. Obviously, he's gonna let her play, which a lot of coaches wouldn't let them play. Oh my gosh. Then there's a great scene. It's also a great, little indication because, after Jimmy basically states, "Okay, you can play," Dottie looks over and says, "You look like crap," and all this kind of stuff. And again, it's just a great indicator of their relationship. And then there's and then Stillwell, the angel child Stillwell, he's kind of taunting him. He's like, "You're gonna win. You're gonna win." Yeah, Stillwell's one of my favorite parts. Again, Stillwell, underrated part of this movie right now. And then Evelyn's just kind of, Stillwell, Angel, you're going to stay out here. You're going to come into the dugout. I love Evelyn and Stillwell. They're such a great pair. Now they are finally starting the gameplay. And honestly, this basically until the end of the game here, it's going to be a bit of a play-by-play. I mean, again, the thing is it's an exciting game. I mean, and then Rosie. By the way, they also cut to Rosie O'Donnell with such great trash talking in this World Series game. But again, early on, I mean, there's not a whole lot of scoring. I mean, it's kind of a bit of a boring game, at least at first, But I mean, obviously, as you go along, I mean, they get, they score a couple runs, and Evelyn, as we saw earlier in the game, Evelyn missed the pickoff woman again, so that ultimately cost them a run. Again, that was the thing that Jimmy had, kind of berated her earlier in the game. So, and again, you're going to see Jimmy again. The next interaction with Jimmy and Evelyn. You can tell he's really upset because he's like shaking and he's like just trying his best to not just blow his top. But he's really again, it's something like you're still missing the cutoff woman. Something you need to work on for next season. You can tell that Jimmy's just he's just trying his hardest not to yell and scream at her. So, and he gives this really cheesy smile too. But again, I mean, it shows great restraint on his part, which some coaches you kind of have to do that. But obviously, it's just it's part of it. So. Oh, Madonna's up. Yeah. Madonna's up to bat. So again, you can obviously tell, Madonna apparently on set was a bit of a diva, and that kind of translates to a bit of her character. I mean, her character is, a little bit flamboyant, a little bit, playing it up for the cameras and whatnot. But all right. Also, another great thing, a little interesting movie tidbit here. Apparently, the first basewoman for Racine is played by actress Taya Leone, which, I mean, she has a very small part in this movie. Of course, for an actress who had quite a bit of a distinguished career after this. I mean, it's a bit of a smaller part. But I'm pretty sure at the time, she wasn't as well known as, nowadays. And then you can kind of start to see Kit starting to give up a few hits to the and I forgot to mention at this point. I apologize. Kit at this point has been traded to Racine. Actually, again, that was one of the big reasons why Kit and Dottie had gotten into an argument. Earlier in the movie, Kit had gotten traded off of the Rockford Peaches. Basically, Ira Lowenstein had stated to Dottie, I know that you and Kit are kind of in a little bit of an argument right now, so I kind of know. So I mean, I can make something happen, and ultimately Dottie wanted to leave the league, and ultimately Lowenstein's solution was to trade Kit to the Racine Bells, which just so happened to have them playing in the World Series together. So you basically have Kit pitching off against Dottie right now and pitching against your former team, and Kit just gave up about 3 hits in that inning and gave up 2 runs right now. And so now Rockford finally takes the lead back. Rockford up 2-1. It's currently the top of the 9th inning. We're getting down to the ending of the game here. You can obviously tell it really affected. Kit is really affected by Dottie hitting the ball. Again, going back to Kit wearing her emotions on her sleeve. And again, I mean, obviously, for every baseball movie, it has to be a dramatic ending. I mean, you can't have a baseball movie ending with a boring game. I mean, it has to. You got to. I mean, so this is basically this is about as exciting as it gets for baseball. You're at the bottom of the 9th inning, 7th game of the World Series, and you're down by one. You're down by 1 run. You basically just need to score 1 run, and to tie the game and to put it into extra innings, obviously. But again, you obviously see, I mean, it's not a situation that, you lose your head over. And you obviously see Kit in the dugout really upset about it. Of course, she's got other things going on. I mean, she's really affected by, Dottie coming out and she's really upset about all of it. So I also will admit, I mean, the music in this movie, I mean, I didn't pay much attention to it because there was such great the great performances, the great story and the comedic acting. But I'll tell you what, Hans Zimmer he's put together a great score for this championship game here. And also Rosie O'Donnell, this scene, she's just loud, very loud and very excited. I mean, you got to they're now up to, I believe, Okay, so Racine just got one person on base. Racine's got one on base, one on first base with one out. Still the bottom of the ninth. Up. Racine foul ball, and Dottie goes in, catches it. So, 7th game of the World Series. Again, 7th game of the World Series. 2 outs. You got one more out, and if they get this last out, Rockford wins the World Series. And it just so happens that on this last out, Kit comes out and pitches. I mean, not pitches. Goes out and hits for Racine. You can obviously tell, I mean, she's really having to really psych herself up for this. There's a little bit of a dramatic stare down at the plate. Of course, obviously, it obviously has to end this way. I mean, it can't end with Kit, not batting last. But of course, that's just kind of how movies are. And going back to the beginning of the movie, one thing that Dottie knows about Kit, obviously Dottie is able to know about, Dottie knows about Kit, how Kit can, what, pitches Kit can hit and what pitches Kit can't hit. Dottie knows that, Kit really struggles with, the high fastball, so she really, she goes out, tells her pitcher, go high and fast on her, and she won't be able to hit it. By the way, Kit wears number 23, same number as as icons LeBron James and Michael Jordan. And then Rosie O'Donnell again is thanking God for the strike that Kit just hit. And Kit just had another strike. So this is almost one of Kit's last is bad right now. You gotta imagine, this is really exciting. You gotta imagine, for anybody, not even just for movie baseball, but for watching regular baseball in real life. That's one of the most exciting times in baseball. The championship game. It's the last. If you're the team that's up, it's the last out before you finally can win the game. And it's a very high stress, very exciting time. And Kit hits the ball, all right. So Kit hits the ball, hits it pretty far away, and she takes off running. Rounds first base, rounds second base. Racine scores. And Evelyn hits the cutoff man, or cutoff woman, I might say. And now Kit does something that she should not have done. Kit is charging home plate with Dottie, and Dottie has the ball, and Kit apparently reaches home, kind of basically knocks Dottie over, and Dottie loses the ball. And Kit is declared safe. And that means Racine wins the championship. So I guess in reality they got some part of reality right. Racine did win the first AAGPBL championship, and so they did in this movie as well. So, but again, the thing with Kit and the thing with what happened with Kit there is, she rounded third plate, and the third basewoman had caught the ball, and she had caught the ball basically at the third plate, and as she was rounding it, the third basewoman literally just had to take and throw the ball to home. So in 99% of those situations, Kit would have been tagged out. Of course, at the time, Racine had already tied the game up. And, it would have gone into extra innings at that point. But you know what? Good for Kit, she finally gets her moment in the spotlight. She's, finally proven everybody that, she's such a, she's not just, her sister's not in the league just because of her sister. But good for Kit, Obviously, you feel sad. You feel sad for the Rockford Peaches. The Rockford Peaches are actually despite losing this championship game, they actually went on to become the most successful team in the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. They actually, I believe they won the most championships out of any team. They won 4 World Series titles. Generally regarded as the best team in the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. At least one of the most probably popular because of this movie, because they're featured so prominently. And you kind of see it, and you also, again, going back to the beginning of the movie, I mean, I'd mentioned that, Dottie was kind of apprehensive of going to the reunion in the present day, and you kind of gotten the idea that, something had kind of happened between either her and her sister Kit. And you kind of see that a little bit here, but you also kind of see that right now that they're about to make up, and really nice little scene here between the both of them. You kind of get that, Kit has their moment in the sun, and Dottie's kind of giving her, her. And you even saw, Kit kind of being a little defensive, how she was earlier in the game. And now you kind of start to see that, they're going their separate ways. Kit's, Dottie's saying that, she's going back to Oregon with Bob, and Kit's, stating now that she's going to actually stay in Racine with, some of her teammates. So you kind of see that they're going to start going their separate ways. And then, Dottie's not coming back to play again. Kit's Kit's like, you're going to come back and play. And Dottie's like, no, Bob and I are going to start a family. And, we're going to, you're going to miss it. And, Dot, I mean, and again, it's I really like this scene. Again, I mean, as I said earlier, I mean, they had such a great relationship. I mean, you could definitely tell that there was a great, they had such a great, not respect for each other. Kit and Dottie. I mean, they, for as much, as much crap as they gave each other, there's definitely a bit of respect, and there's definitely a lot of love there. Anyway, it kind of culminates in, Dottie tells Kit, I'm really gonna miss you, and I think also, one of the good things about this movie, obviously, is the importance of, I believe, of relationships and sibling relationships. I'm not even just relationships, not just sibling relationships, because all the girls, they build such great relationships with each other, and that's one of the reasons I love this movie a lot. But again, also, there's a scene here, in which, Dottie, is going to miss, playing, baseball with her little sister, which, again, I mean, it's, for some people, that's, for some people that, have played sports with their siblings, I mean, it's quite a rewarding experience, actually. All right. So now we're kind of winding down the 1943 story here. Again, not a whole lot to say kind of towards the endings of these movies here. I mean, and again, I mean, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, I mean, at the end of this first season, I mean, they were going to stick around for a while. However, they only stuck around for about 11 more seasons after this. I mean, they actually, I think, about 11 more seasons. They only lasted from 1943 to 1954, until the ending there. Until the ending, in which they had to ultimately shut the league down and whatnot. An interesting scene that I just realized here. You finally meet Doris's father, who had owned that club that May and Doris had met each other at. Again, early in the movie, May was a dancer at Doris's father's club. And I just realized there was also a little bit of there was a little bit of the romance that was between that was supposed to be between Dottie and Jimmy, because you kind of see Jimmy's like, so that's Bob, because Jimmy meets Bob, Dottie's husband, and there's kind of a bit of a there's a bit of a reaction there. He's like, Jimmy's like, nice guy, huh? And he kind of is like, nah, he goes into the bus without really saying anything. So and then that's the end of the 1943 story. We're cutting back to the present now. So it basically been one giant flashback for Dottie, again told by Dottie's perspective. Now they're showing her at one of these and even as an elderly woman, she can still catch a baseball with her bare hands, which is what they just showed here. And she's meeting up with her old teammates. But basically, they're showing her and the old teammates at a reunion of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. These reunions are actually very commonplace, especially during the 80s and the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. In fact, actually, one of the impetus for this movie actually being made was the director Penny Marshall actually saw a documentary, a 1987 PBS documentary titled A League of Their Own, which basically went over basically kind of chronicled the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. And and again, these reunions they were happening before this movie came out. Again, this movie came out in 1992, but nobody really knew about the league before the movie came out. Because again, it was only around for 11 years, as I'd stated earlier, but it was such a short, such a short history. Not as long as Major League Baseball, not as long as any of the other professional sports leagues. But I think even because of how short its history was, it kind of gets lost it kind of faded into obscurity. None of the women are very few of the women, are household names. For people that are, Major League Baseball fans, they're, Joe DiMaggio, is a big name, Ted Williams, and, Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth. But there are no women like that, of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League that, unfortunately, it's just because they didn't have. I'm pretty sure they didn't have the exposure that people in the majors had, or just the exposure that that the historians would give them. All right, bit of a touching scene here. We meet a grown-up Stillwell. We realize that her mother had passed away. That his mother had passed away. Excuse my flub up there. Kind of such a nice little kind of wrapping up scene. You get to see Dottie kind of look at Jimmy's kind of little thing in the Hall of Fame. Hit 58 home runs in 1936. That's quite a bit of home runs, actually. And obviously Jimmy had passed away before this movie, so. Though I believe he was born the same. Again, Jimmy Dugan. Modeled after Jimmy Fox. I believe their years were actually very similar. I believe Jimmy Fox was born in 1906, same as Jimmy Dugan. So now they're showing a much older Ira Lowenstein cutting the ribbon off to the Women in Baseball exhibit to the National Baseball Hall of Fame. A real exhibit at the Cooperstown Hall of Fame. a permanent exhibit that still is there to this day. Cooperstown, New York, the home of the National Baseball Hall of Fame, opened the Women in Baseball exhibit in 1988. Also, I do believe we're showing a grown-up Ernie Campadino, the scout played by Jon Lovitz earlier in the movie. And the interesting thing about this Women in Baseball exhibit, it doesn't really, at least in the National Baseball Hall of Fame, it doesn't highlight any one particular player. It just kind of highlights, them as a collective group per se. Of course, in this movie, obviously, a lot of the photos are, not the same, not real. I mean, they're, obviously actresses. The actresses, Geena Davis, Lori Petty in this one scene here. And now they're starting to sing the theme song to the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. And no, I'm not going to sing it right now. And again, this was the song. I do believe I don't know if they sang it when they were playing ball, but they were definitely singing it and definitely singing them at the reunions there, in which is what they're showing here. So this is obviously a fictional recreation of obviously a real life event that just happened. And now they're showing Kit coming to the exhibit. Now, the one thing that I noticed is that Kit brought literally her entire family, and Dottie didn't bring her family. I mean, Kit literally brought, it looks like her sons and her grandsons, granddaughters. So. But again, it's such a great reunion, great relationship. And even the older actresses that play them, for the short scene that they have together, it's such a great chemistry together. I would say it's one of my favorite parts of this movie. Would probably be the relationship between Kit and Dottie. Even though it has its ups and downs, I mean, it's still a good relationship. It's a good team. And they're panning to a final team shot of the Rockford Peaches, and that is it. One last title card. This film is dedicated to the members of the AAGPBL, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. Now, those reunions, they still happen nowadays. They're unfortunately, a lot of All-American Girls Professional Baseball League players have passed away. Believe one of the numbers kind of put the estimate at only being around 100. There was about 600 women, probably over 600 women total that played. Hundreds of women that played in the league, and now they estimated only about 150 are still alive nowadays. But again, obviously as age, goes along, the one thing, about, athletics and about competition, is that, time is the only, time is undefeated, and, time defeats us all at some point. And I do believe they are showing a real footage of the actual members of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League playing a pickup baseball game at one of these reunions. So again, it's such a great movie. First off, at least, and again, from my point of view, you got great actresses, great. All the actresses on the Rockford Peaches, I thought they gave great performances. You got to know a little bit of each of them. You knew, Lori Petty's character. You knew Geena Davis and Dottie, very well. You knew Madonna's character May. You knew Rosie O'Donnell's character Doris very well. But still, I mean, even some of the other players that you didn't get to meet as well, but you still met them a little bit during the film. You still kind of fell in love with all of them. They're really wonderful women. I mean, they're such a great team. To be around. They had such great relationships with each other, and it's such a great performances, great characters. And also, I mean, the movie's just dang funny. I mean, you got to remember, at the end of it, it is a comedy, and while it does have it is technically one of those a comedy drama, and it has its moments of being dramatic. I mean, and the tense scenes between Kit and Dottie, but again, I mean, at the end of the day, it's there's some just hilarious moments on there. I mean, Jimmy Dugan, I mean, for the first part of the movie, I mean, he's really hilarious. I mean, Rosie O'Donnell is just an absolute hoot throughout the entire movie. I mean, it's just kind of like, and Stillwell, I mean, gotta love Stillwell. He's one of my favorite characters of this entire movie, obviously. And, so again, I mean, if you're not a person that's interested in history, which I wouldn't be, I couldn't believe if you weren't interested in this history, because it's such riveting history, because the women that were playing this game are really pioneers, honestly. I mean, even nowadays, women's athletics is just not as commonplace, it just doesn't get as good of a rap as, men's athletics does. And unfortunately, it's even thinking about it, the thing is, like, in sports in general, you think about, like, basketball, football, baseball even, you always notice that, it's marketed towards, the male audience, and they always found it funny that, they didn't really take the time and effort to, market, a lot of these sports leagues to, try to market them to, females, even though, like, nowadays, even, like, the organizers of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, they created their own little, I believe it's the American Girls Baseball Association, which, advocates, for women playing in baseball nowadays. Oh dear, the end credits here, they're showing a woman getting into the face of one of the umpires. Oh, that's funny. That was really hilarious. But again, it's just, even nowadays, obviously, softball is, a very popular sport, amongst women and, amongst girls. But, there's some that, still are trying to fight to play baseball, because, as only a casual fan of baseball and softball, I couldn't tell you the differences. Obviously, besides, underhand pitching and overhand pitching and, the bigger ball and the softball, but, again, there are still a lot of a lot of women that are fighting to play baseball, and obviously the women that the organizers of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League and the reunions nowadays, they helped create these what's known as the AGB, the American Girls Baseball, and I call it association. That just kind of helps them get a foot into playing baseball. But even like nowadays, the WNBA, very popular amongst, people. I'm not really well versed on professional softball leagues. I do know that they're even in like for football, even, a sport that's been always dominated by, men. There's even like some, they got, like football leagues, like actual tackle football leagues. They even have what's called the lingerie football league. But sports nowadays. I think we definitely need to. I think normalize. Women's athletics. Trying to prop that up as much as we do for the males' athletics. But again, it all started with the women of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. I'll tell you what, I mean, it takes a lot of courage to do what they did, because you got probably a lot of detractors. I mean, you even saw it in the movie a little bit here. They had a lot of people, at least in this movie, that were kind of, at least laughing at them at first. And, you had people, even like probably other like conservative women that would have been like, that's not where a woman should be. A woman's place is in the home. And it takes a lot of courage to do, to branch out and to do something new that, that at the time, you just wasn't in the norm for these women. So, my hats are off to all of them. I mean, this movie is a great memorial to all of them. It's a movie dedicated to, all the women that played in that great league, and hopefully it's not forgotten anytime soon. And unfortunately, since a lot of them are starting to pass away, hopefully, the surviving members, and obviously the surviving members' families, the people that, the girls that, or women that are attempting to play in baseball nowadays, hopefully that they can keep their fighting spirit going, and hopefully we'll never forget them. All right, that is it. I watched it all the way through the credits. I talked through the credits there, and I am now done. Don't really have a whole lot else to say. And again, I mean, for those of you that are interested, A League of Their Own is also a documentary. You can watch it look it up on YouTube. There's a 27-minute documentary on the league. Again, A League of Their Own, great movie, really funny, really, really great performances by the actresses. And also by Tom Hanks and Jon Lovitz and some of the actors that were in it as well. But anyway, that is where I will sign off. Again, I want to thank you all again so much for listening. Again, I see the numbers growing and the viewership. So, again, really thank you all for taking the time just to tune in and listen. I mean, again, I don't do this for views. I mean, I just kind of do this just kind of I love watching movies, and I love love history, and it's kind of marries my two loves together. But no, so far so good. But nope, this is it. Thank you all for tuning in, listening on YouTube. Remember, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and almost anywhere else that you can find your podcasts at. And I will see you on the flip side.